So tonight we have with us Tori Gates, who graduated from Williston in 2010. She has worked in nonprofit management and operations with a focus on drug policy and money in politics for the previous decade. While at Ithaca College studying psychology and marketing with a focus on cannabis startups and cannabis marketing, she was the president of the college's Student for Sensible Drug Policy chapter, focusing on public education with programs like Just Say No, Know Your Rights, and policy change campaigns to equalize the penalties for cannabis and alcohol in partnership with campus public safety and administration. After college, she worked on leading field and political operations for city and statewide money in politics, voting reform and legalization ballot initiatives in South Dakota and Colorado. Tori began working for NisonCo, and I hope I said that right, NisonCo, in 2017 when she moved to Colorado from Massachusetts, and she uses her experience to build cannabis marketing campaigns, offer top-notch marijuana marketing strategy, and create successful systems for the fully remote team. When she's not running operations and business development, you'll find her ripping down the ski slopes, cooking in the kitchen, and enjoying the Rocky Mountain High. Shaun Chapman, class of 98, graduated from Hartwick College in Oneonta, New York, with a BA in economics and a minor in theater arts, followed by a postgrad degree in economics at the University of Essex, Colchester in England. He is the director of government relations for Weedmaps, the largest and oldest technology platform in the world, serving legal cannabis markets. Previously, Shaun was VP Chief of Staff for Energy Policy for Tesla and Solar City. He's proud to serve on the Heads Visiting Council for Williston and lives in Brooklyn, New York. He has never turned down a slice of key lime pie. So with that, we're going to turn the evening over to Shaun and Tori and ask them to start off by just saying a little bit about the path that they took from Williston to here. So you guys can unmute and jump on in.
Tori, you want to take first stab?
Yeah, sure. And thanks so much, Jill, for those great introductions. Well, I mean, I graduated in class of 10, so I'm going to be having my 10-year reunion all remote this year. So my path has been pretty short and full of connections. I know Shaun and I have talked a lot about networking, and that's how I got from Williston to Ithaca, Ithaca to politics, and politics to cannabis. And so I think like what's most important to know about me is my rebellious leadership style and just always getting out there, meeting people, talking to people, and, not saying no to anything. Pretty much that's how I ended up with Students for Sensible Drug Policy. It's how I ended up in my career in politics and how I ended up actually with this all remote team, NisonCo, with cannabis PR and SEO focused. And so now I'm director of operations there. It's an all remote team. So if anyone has questions about remote lifestyle now that most of you have done it for the last year, happy to have any side conversations about that after this. And what's really important too is my focus with advocacy, marketing, and public relations in the cannabis space. The industry has obviously changed a lot since 2011 when I began my career as a cannabis advocate, and new states have come online from ballot initiatives and more recently via state legislatures, and forever there's those like whispers of federal legalization just around the corner. So just teasing a little bit of how what's to come. So Shaun, I'll toss it over to you.
Thank you so much. I feel like you're the anti-Nancy Reagan. You're a just say yes person. I like that. I graduated Williston '98 and went to Hartwick College. I thought I wanted to be an actor, but it turns out that what I really wanted to do was just do econometrics all the time, and that actually proved not to be the case. What I really wanted to do was be a lobbyist. After I left the University of Essex, I came back not really knowing what I wanted to do. I knew I cared a lot about the environment. As Niels knows, I believe that this is our Earth, and that it should be protected as such. So I spent most of my career at the early stages of my career in nonprofit advocacy on behalf of clean energy. And from there, I ended up at a solar energy company, Solar City, which was, of course, acquired by Tesla. And after about 15 years in that sector, I wanted to try something different. It was about 2017, and I literally saw a sign that told me where I should go next. Was Weedmaps took out these billboards that had all these facts about trying to change the narrative around the discussion around cannabis policy and implementation. And I was like, that seems interesting. And I just sort of cold called them, and here I am 3 years later. I think the defining thread through all of those is, and something that I really do strongly want to reinforce that through Williston and what tools that Williston has sort of gave me, was the challenging of the status quo, that the ridiculousness of our built infrastructure and still relying so heavily on fossil fuel. It never stopped right with me, and that it needed to be shifted. And the ridiculousness of being able to buy, a 6-pack of White Claw, not knocking out White Claw anywhere you want, but we're still incarcerating tens of thousands of people on the daily in this country for something that I think we all can agree some of us may have taken trips down to the Manhan to enjoy at some point or another. So, Williston certainly was a place that encouraged me and my peers to challenge assumptions and go against the grain, and it's led me here. So hopefully that wraps that up nicely.
Heck yeah, I definitely think so. And I'll echo that as well. I mean, that's where my rebellion certainly started. That's how I ended up in Williston, was through rebellion. And Williston helped me channel that into a productive sense and to build on pond leadership. So definitely shout out there.
Common theme, I think.
Totally. Well, I think that we wanted to get started, maybe giving some framing for folks as to the regulatory path of how we got to where we are and how we might get to where we're going next. So, Shaun, I'll toss that over to you since you are the policy expert here.
Sure. I sit on the East Coast, part of our team. I'm kind of in charge of everything that kind of touches the Eastern Seaboard for the most part, and federal policy and Canada. And by and large, what we have mostly seen up to this point is that it's gone through the ballot, and those ballots by and large are overwhelmingly popular. I mean, public polling, and just the poll that matters the most is the final one, the vote. People turn out in droves. This last run was no exception. On more than 11 ballots measures, all of them passed, including one of the Dakotas. Geez, it's blanking me right now. Sal's going to catch me on this. The South one, right? Yep. South Dakota did both medical and recreational in one fell swoop. Of course, they're getting challenged in court a little bit right now, and the governor's not being very helpful with that. But it's clear that this is extremely popular. And usually, what happens is there's a medical program that gets installed, and then a few years later, after some of that stigma has been reduced, adult use, as we like to call it, comes forward. That gap is narrowing. I mean, people are going straight to adult use now, though in 40 plus states, there's a medical program already in the country. So we also like to say that in more than a third of the country operates under some legal cannabis structure. So that's really moving things to the federal level. We've started to exhaust a lot of those ballot initiatives. I mean, they're not all done. I think there's more to be done in, say, Florida, for instance, but obviously extremely expensive there. But we're now starting to get to the states where ballot measures just aren't an option, particularly in the Northeast, where you have an old, colonial style of government where everything has to be done at state houses, and it is significantly more difficult there. And I think a really good example of that was the ballot initiative, but it was really technically a constitutional amendment in New Jersey last year. And that passed with 67% of the vote from New Jersey, and did not lose a single county, and only 2 municipalities in the 500 plus that are in the Garden State, only 2 municipalities had less than the 50% threshold. So that overwhelming passed. And then it had to be implemented by the legislature, and they took 6 months to do it. I mean, they could not have a clear indication that people were for this, and yet we're still dragging their heels. So I think one of those things is, I mean, the average age of a United States senator is plus 62 years old. Now, I'm not saying anything about our older alumni here. I'm just saying that that is generations of the talking dog and Nancy Reagan. I paid attention to all those things as a kid, and it's really ingrained in these people, and they're really worried about the pushback. And it's not so much that they can see those numbers, but when we have conversations, they still use the old tropes, gateway drug. What are we going to do about intoxicated driving? Well, what are you doing about it now? Because it's certainly happening now. And if you think it's not, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. So that's kind of the next frontier. And then just to touch on the federal, and then I'll toss it back to you, Tori, for anything to add that I've missed is, on the federal level, we're all kind of operating. I know Sal Pace, class of '95, is here. Is the president and board of the board at the Marijuana Policy Project, and certainly has seen the same. Is that these states start to add up to a whole country, and so movement at the federal level does seem to be more imminent than it was. I don't think it's quite as easy as some of maybe the VC folks are reporting on it right now, but there's probably two steps to that. Something like the Safe Banking Act, which would give protections to states who already have a legal infrastructure to access federal credit and loans and not be hindered for operating with a illegal substance at the federal level. So that would probably be the first step, and the one after that is something that looks more like the MORE Act, which is a much more robust legalization program for the entire country that has passed already in the House, but obviously on mostly bipartisan lines, although a few do supports from Republican House members on that. And I think I can't prognosticate about timeline. I mean, if it's going to happen soon, it happens quick now. Schumer and Booker are getting on this now. But if it's going to take a little longer, one of the challenges there, and there are smart people on the call that can correct my thinking if necessary, but this is a turn out the vote thing for 2022, right? And Democrats want to keep that as an issue and a hot button issue. And if they solve everything, well, it's hard to turn supporters out. So that actually is something to think about. And some Republicans are coming along. Steve Daines has moved into the former Cory Gardner role, former Republican senator from Colorado, who lost to Hickenlooper. But Steve Daines has started to take up his mantle as sort of the Republican champion on this, because Montana's moving forward with their legalization efforts. So it'll definitely be very exciting. It will either be really quick or very slow, like somewhere and nowhere in between.
Nice. Yeah, that definitely feels like what's going to be happening. They can't, give it all away so soon, especially after 2020 with all those ballot initiatives passed. It was such a big win that they feel like, we can probably ride this high for a little bit longer before they've got to dangle this chance in front of us. It's interesting. So I'm from Massachusetts, from Western Mass, actually, but I live in Colorado now. And it's been, pretty good, easy going here, having legalization. We have the ballot initiative process, which is how this whole thing kicked off in 2012. And we're slowly running out of states, as Shaun had mentioned, that actually have the ballot initiative process, at which point, especially in the Northeast, things are going to be turning to what we saw like in Virginia, where it's a simple yes or no vote to legalize, and then they're going to hammer out the details later. And so you might be seeing more states coming online. Vermont did this as well, where it's like, yes, weed is legal, and now all of a sudden there's this gray area where there's no regulations, and we're just going to exist in this until it's important enough for us to actually do something about it. And so I just want to, give that caveat that just because legalization is happening doesn't mean that a legal market in that state is actually around the corner. Does mean, though, if you've got capital to invest in real estate, that before that vote comes, you should invest in that real estate and hold on to it, because that's something they've been seeing, especially in New York, with prices in real estate just going through the roof because they're talking about legalization, which they have been for a little while. And who knows now with Cuomo what's actually going to happen there. Let's see. Another important thing to bring up is like this piecemeal approach that we've been going on as we legalize with states. There are pros and cons to it. Each state has been able to craft a system that's going to work kind of best for them, and they're able to adjust it. There's not like one size fits all, but it then can actually put some protections in place that federal efforts might overlook. And Shaun had brought this up when we were discussing earlier, but there are, communities are able to then regulate as they see fit. And so, Shaun, feel free to like correct me if I'm misspeaking about Northampton, for example, but when Massachusetts passed, Massachusetts enacted a 3% community impact fee. And after, I think that was 2016, so after basically 4 years after the legalization vote, they realized that the impact actually wasn't as much as they thought. So Northampton was able to drop that fee, able to basically lessen taxes, allow more disproportionately affected communities to actually get in because the barrier and the cost to entry is lower.
Yeah, that's right. And a couple of really important things that you brought up there, Tori, is like, I think that gets to our next topic, is just social equity in the space. It is crucial. It is the most talked about and important aspect of moving forward. And one of the challenges of this space, and Massachusetts is probably the best example of it all. And you mentioned the impact fee, and they put a lot of restrictions on actually getting open. The licensing process has been exceedingly slow. And so there's that. There's a lot of barriers in terms of negotiating a contract with the town of where you can site and locate. You actually have to hold on to the real estate. And if you're talking about the Boston metropolitan area, you're talking in excess of, easily $50,000 a month to secure at the bottom to secure a space. And you'll have to secure that before you have any hope of operation. So in most cases, at a minimum, that's 6 months. In others, it's even longer. I think Jason Tong's coming on. I know he's working through a location in Weedmaps where they're trying to secure the site, all that, and they have to go through all this community fighting and planning. And so then if you think about some of the communities that have the less access to capital, and let's pathway this, plus consider the fact that with the exception of a few credit agencies within the state, credit unions and the like that, it's hard to get loan and financing in this. And they certainly take those who are investing are taking a significant premium, north of 10%. On some of those business loans, which is exceedingly high. And so it makes it very, very, very challenging. And so if you think about communities that have access to that type of capital, it by and large is disproportionately not inclusive. And it's one of the big challenges, especially if you regulate. I understand that states are dipping their toe in and feeling very much like, well, wow, we don't want a free-for-all on this cannabis stuff. But in so doing, they're making it even harder for people to participate and have a meaningful pathway forward. So it's really something that goes along with all of this. I mean, it's not as simple as a yes/no question, as Tori pointed out. It really, the details of this, okay, yes, and we'll have this, but if there's no state supplied loan funding, low or no interest loans, or not just outright grants, it's pretty hard to find funding to secure the capital to secure a location, and then get the lawyer fees to fight and work through these host community agreements, town zoning boards, then have 30 just like busybody neighbors who are like, I don't want a weed shop here, and I want this place to look like it looked when Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick, and I bought it here because be like that. And you're like, can we all like calm down, please, and have a little bit more of a reasonable approach to this. So those are some of the challenges that we kind of lead into the social equity talk of the portion of the talk. Tori, I don't know if you wanted to add some more to that, color to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the cannabis industry is trying to reckon with those early legalization states. It was like kind of in the back of the mind, but it was more important to get the foot in the door to say like, okay, if we can just get an industry going, then we can work out the pieces later. Because the more we add, especially in states that have single subject rules where you're only allowed a yes or no legalization vote, that you can't add in all these social equity aspects. And so it's something that's really important on the community level to hopefully set good precedent for when the federal level comes around. And that's, I think, what's really interesting to see right now, especially with the lobbying efforts, since that's kind of, how we get things done on the federal level, is especially with like labor unions and the corporate sponsors that are coming in with these lobbying efforts as to who are they representing and what are their interests, what issues are they pushing. We're all facing this similar issue right now, that the industry is growing and big money is starting to flow in. Every single growing industry kind of ends up facing this. And so what we're, at least on Shaun and I's side of the industry, what we're really focused on is moving and making sure that the advocacy space is a part of this. And that's where we can names drop some awesome nonprofits that are in the space, like Normal, a National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, MPP, Marijuana Policy Project, SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And there's others that are more focused less on lobbying and more on the equity side of things.
Yeah, I'll name drop a couple more. The
Please.
Minorities for Medical Minorities for Medical Marijuana, another great organization. One that Sal and I work with all the time, Minority Cannabis Business Association, is really really awesome. And look, my company, our first touch point with the consumers, we're a menu, right? We're much more than that, but that's how most people see us, and that's how we touch. Now, for us, and one of the things that I enjoy about working for the company is that it aligns with my own personal values. But menus aren't interesting if there's one item on it, right? They're interesting if there are many items on there, but people can choose. We have a filter that is this a minority-owned business? If that's something that consumers very much care about. And you could just filter in, and it will take out the others and list the social equity applicants. There are social equity programs in the state or in the area. So it's something that actually drives our business, because this space, if it only looks homogenous, our offering is not that interesting, and we certainly stand to lose less. But it's also, we very strongly feel that if these programs are not robust, if they're not inclusive, they have no chance of passage anyway. So might as well work on having as much of a diverse workforce and opportunity set as possible.
Definitely. Yeah. And now that the industry is established, there are, as Shaun had mentioned, there's still tens of thousands of people being arrested for nonviolent drug offenses, specifically cannabis, but other drugs as well, which is kind of where the cannabis industry is headed, into these other realms of psychedelics and other exciting things, but we'll save that for another conversation. But there are some other great nonprofits too, like the Walden Project, Last Prisoner Project, and Canaclusive, which has a subsect of Cannabis for Black Lives Matter, which is really helpful in basically keeping the industry accountable. Their focus is to hold down and say, oh, like, look at your board, look who your board's made up of. Yeah, Shaun, I know you guys say you partner with them
like
a lot.
One of the coolest things they do, that which is also like better not be on this list, is the old they have the Cannabis Accountability Project, right? So when Black Lives Matter was really hitting its crescendo, obviously it had been around for a number of years, but it was really hitting its crescendo last year in the wake of George Floyd and so many of the other tragedies that came over the summer. It was popular to put out a press release, maybe put a little square on your Instagram that says, hey, we're here, solidarity, right? Okay. They took the names down and said, what's your board look like in a year? What are your programs looking like? Are they funded? Did you give the money you said you were going to fund? Where did it go? And I think that's really important. Press, you're gonna have to get beyond press releases. They're all nice, and that period was important. But the actual work, the actual moving forward and sticking to doing what you were going to say you're going to do, it's really unique in this industry. I mean, I've only worked in a couple, but I do think that because of its roots, because where it comes from, and the importance of organizing, they're not going. The advocate community is not going down without a fight on this stuff. And capitalism is capitalism, and corporations are going to be corporations. But the organizing on this has been extremely impressive from a lot of fronts, and just a shout out to all of them. They're really inspirational on a daily basis.
Yeah, coming from the trenches and door knockings back in the early teens, that's definitely, it's great to see like how far we've come and how the talking points have evolved, and the equity in the space as well. I mean, that's what's so important too, is Shaun and I are both leaders at our organization, and so what we try to do is make sure that there is room at the table for all aspects, whether it's nonprofits who we're partnering with, pro bono work that we're providing, social equity, and the way that we give back. And we're all just at the beginning to see the pathways, and it's really not worth closing any doors on any avenues. That's what I do, PR and marketing. It's all about networking. And so we're never going to tell someone, no, we can't help you. We're always going to make an effort to make a single connection, because you just never know who that connection is going to lead to. Maybe it's another 3 down the line, but it's important to do your part, and really to make sure that we're providing the space and the equity, so a large range of people are also able to be involved in this space. Like we're seeing that now with a thought diversity coming in, folks coming in from well-established industries in Wall Street and trying to kind of make things maybe more corporate, or change the way that things are, or change things to the status quo. And so it's important to really approach what we're doing with humility, to listen and learn before you speak, and to learn about who's actually in the room and bring forward a discussion, rather than I'm going to talk at you. This is the right way to do things. This is the wrong way to do things. So with that all in mind, that's kind of how you become an entrepreneur too in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, seamless segue. That was actually really good. Yeah. What is really cool about the space now is it's cool and frustrating, right? I will say, like, if you're looking to make a quick buck, this is not the place for you. But if you are a person who just likes doing a lot of things, because one day you may have to review site plans, and the next day you have to do an environmental remediation study, but then the other you might have to do quite a bit of community organizing, and basically everyone who runs a cannabis business or gets involved is some form of an organizer. It's just like your second job that you have to do, even if you're in accounting. There's so many things that you'll be tasked to, and it's still at such a nascent stage that I think that was one of the themes of a lot of the questions that we were pre-getting, was kind of, how do you get involved and what can you do? Well, you just have to have a thirst to want to do a lot of things. Learn a little bit about accounting, learn a little bit about the legal process, learn a little bit about lobbying, learn a little bit about operations, learn how to write a press release, learn how to run your Twitter handle. Like, there's just so much that folks can do. And if you're willing to learn and be patient with it, there's the opportunity is endless. But if this is the kind of place where you want to come in and have a nice cushy corporate job, even for a long-standing company like ours, it's over 10 years old, if you can believe it. That's not what my day looks like on a general basis. Wear a lot of hats, even though we're what I would say is more late stage. It's just, you have to wear a lot of different hats, and it's fun and exciting, but those are the challenges. I don't know if you found the same, Tori.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, our company was founded in 2013, 2014, specifically for lobbying. And then we started getting into the PR space in 2014, 2015. I didn't join until 2017. And I started just doing research for the company, also like helping to set up the company itself. We didn't have a handbook. We didn't have anything. We had to like set up employees because everyone was contractors, and I didn't have a lot of experience in that. And so now I'm doing marketing. I'm leading team members, and it's just really, you have to be excited and you have to be an entrepreneur. I have folks in the organization where that's one of our screening questions is like, tell me about your entrepreneurial past and what you want to keep doing, because just because you hire us we hire you doesn't mean that there's actually like a horizontal path moving forward. You're going to start here and you're just going to climb the corporate ladder. That's definitely not how the cannabis industry is. And I think it's because it was started by a bunch of mavericks. And I think we're going to fight tooth and nail to kind of keep it that way, so that only the true enthusiasts end up staying in the industry. And I think that too is it's pretty interesting as we see, a lot of destigmatization of folks jumping into the industry as well. We have folks coming from Wall Street, coming from, maybe teachers who are like, oh, I've actually just wanted to like check out being in the weed industry and what that's like. And it's changed a lot. So yes, you do need to be a jack of all trades, but you can have a specialization as well. I think that when the industry started, it was saying like, okay, I just gotta grow weed, and then I'll be in the industry. And now there's so much room for marketing PR professionals, for finance folks, for lawyers, for just like this wide range. I mean, obviously lobbyists, and so we've got folks kind of like jumping over. So I don't know if you got anything to say on that, Shaun.
No, I mean, that's spot on. There's a lot to do. I mean, and I really like the way you framed it. It's like it's a place for enthusiasts, and it's not sort of just like a job. I would highly stress that, and I think for another few years, it's definitely going to look like quite a lot like that for the most part of the sector, because it's just too tough of a business. I mean, absent federal legalization, and I'm going from one state to the next, there's so many different things that, so whatever thing you build has to look different in another state potentially, and so we're constantly just having to stay nimble in that. So I really like the way you frame it. You'd have to have some enthusiasm to participate in the industry.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing like the industry is becoming more established, more formalized. Like now there's written contracts for things, whereas before it was just all word of mouth. Especially you've got a bunch of old heads that have been growing backdoor, like outdoor since the 70s. And now they're like, all right, I'm going to get legitimate. And so you've got this mesh of this old school and new school, which makes it a really exciting place to be. And it's really interesting too to see how like the mainstream is talking about cannabis, whether it's PR or marketing. Shaun, I'm sure you got a lot to say on the marketing side with Weedmaps and what you've seen and the popularity and the just like web presence increase and how much you've grown. But on the PR side, it's really interesting to see the talking points. It's changed from marijuana and pot and all of these other silly words to recognizing that it's cannabis. That's actually the scientific name is cannabis sativa for both cannabis and hemp. And so we're starting to legitimize a little bit. And I'm sure now that you've heard this, when you actually read news articles, you'll notice that it's marijuana busts from police versus it's cannabis legalization and cannabis businesses. And so there's a way now that things are being talked about where it's super different. And it's also really interesting too, when we first started doing PR, there was, High Times and a couple of other really niche local publications that were covering cannabis. And the name of the game was to convince major publications that cannabis is something that readers care about, that's going to bring in money, readership and ad dollars. And so we were perfectly timed with that. We had a lot of contacts in the media space, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we got the okay, we're going to start writing about cannabis. And so coverage was super easy. Everyone was really curious. And now we're starting to get into this more established market where you have to, not just go for the cannabis publications and the mainstream publications, but you have to be super creative about it as well, because everybody's opening up shops everywhere and you've got these major players. And cannabis isn't just this novelty item anymore that it's like, oh, I'll just write about it because it's fun. It's now like legitimate, and it's talking about what are the sustainability aspects of cannabis. Especially greenwashing is like a huge thing that we need to work on avoiding. There's been a lot of pieces. Earth Day is coming up, so people are talking about what are the environmental impacts of growing cannabis indoor versus outdoor, and how are you making sure that sustainability is part of whatever you're doing, whether it's working remote so that way you don't contribute, or you're giving people credits to like ride the subway or to buy a bike so they're able to get to work. And so there's all these creative ways that we're really able to like make sure that sustainability is part of the conversation. I don't know, Shaun, you got anything to say on sustainability?
It's good. Yeah, I mean, this is, we're just now starting to understand sort of the grow impacts and all those things. So I know Massachusetts has some of the strictest environmental compliance standards in the country, and I know that they, you know, it's hard and it's costly, but important ultimately, to make sure. And face it, I mean, a lot of the folks from the cannabis community also do care about protecting the environment. So it's not just the right thing to do, it's just a sensible like marketing strategy, right? Because you're a natural cohort that's going to be drawn even more to your product, if you can build in those efforts. Packaging is a major problem, because of course everyone's worried about the kids getting a hold of things that they shouldn't be getting a hold of. And actually, kudos to the state of Massachusetts. I'm not usually a big applauder for government bureaucracies coming out with creative efforts, but they really did a really nice marketing campaign on it, and went after it honestly about, you know, safe storage habits. And but it's a major problem because that's, you know, a big increase in plastic waste, by having to, in some cases at the outset, it was like double bagging and double bagging and these things are impossible to open, and all the kind of waste that goes into it. So it is definitely an issue.
Yeah, packaging is a serious hot topic issue, especially being in a PR company. We work with packaging companies a lot, and we go through an extra step of vetting when it comes to packaging. We're like, well, so what are you actually doing? We're working with one company that collects recycle like plastic from the ocean, and then uses that and to make their packaging. And everybody loves covering that. It's super exciting versus other folks. They're like, oh, well, you know, we're able to like fit our stuff into boxes and it's square packaging, so it's less packaging. And so there's this line when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to packaging, and thinking of creative solutions as well, of like, how can you return this back to the dispensary to return it, you know, to get this kind of closed loop going on, so that way they can end up reusing it. One of my favorite face products, Lush, does that, where you can just take their packaging back, you take it back clean, and they reuse it for you. And so we have to still work on destigmatizing the fact that it's touched cannabis and that it can go back and be reused again. So it's really like an interesting situation.
Yeah, and on top of that, we haven't even gotten into this, but maybe go to questions after this. But like, what about just the fact that like packaging should look nice, right? Like you have a product, you're trying to sell a product and connect with the consumer and connect with people, and you know, say what you want about the distorted effects of advertising, but people don't know that something exists or what they want. I mean, all of our products are packaged in a way to catch our eye and tell us something about what's in it, and then you have to stick it in this like thing that's double triple sealed, that's like black and opaque. I mean, you're just wasted through those marketing dollars out the door, and the consumer doesn't even know what they're getting, or in some cases, you know, anything about the thing that they just went in. And I find a lot of this, like the biggest thing is people are intimidated about going into shops. I think. I mean, there's certainly a set of users it's comfortable and knows that, but by and large, we've done some polling and field testing on this stuff, and people are intimidated because they don't have a full knowledge. And how do you gain knowledge? How do you ask questions and you read up and you examine, and to put hurdles against that makes it even more challenging to do what we're all in this to do, which is to lower the stigma, normalize, and you know, and at the end of the day, shift through some of our unhealthier habits to more balanced and healthier. So.
Yeah, Canada made a really interesting choice when it came to their federal legalization, was that you could only have like this tiny, like 1 by 1 inch square spot for your logo, and that's it. Otherwise, no advertising whatsoever. And so we're pretty lucky in the United States as to what we're allowed to do in each state. But it does make such a huge difference if you're going to look at a house brand versus like a multi-state operator that has spent millions of dollars on their branding and packaging. It seems more friendly, and consumers are more willing to engage with that and talk about it and learn about it. So yeah, I mean, I think like anything, Shaun, before we kind of like wrap up and go to questions?
Nothing here.
Cool.
Hopefully I didn't scare everyone and tell them that this industry is way too hard to get into and stay away. I find it helps to be real. Like it's challenging, but it's so exciting and ultimately extremely rewarding when you actually finally build the thing that you've been working so hard to build.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think that it's like too intimidating. Like, what's really important in the industry is integrity. Like, if you say you're going to do something, the industry is going to hold you accountable to it. And if you speak poorly of any others in the industry, then you're going to kind of get yourself locked out really quick. We're a super tight knit community. So it can feel a little bit challenging in order to get in. But know that, like, once you're in and you're doing what you need to do, the industry has your back, and they're going to help you out and keep you in the industry as long as you want to stay there.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
That's great. So on that note, I think we'll open up a little bit for questions. Thank you both so much. That was a great overview. I know there's so much to cover. So we're going to return us all back together by taking you guys out of the spotlight. Doing my best to take you out of the spotlight. And those of you who are watching along may want to go back and check your screen and return yourself to gallery view so that you can see everyone who's here. And we should all be coming together. And those of you who've got your video off, if you're interested in putting your video on and joining us, please do. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and just put them in the chat. You don't have to say what they are. You can just say, I have a question, and we'll go around and get to you. I'd also like to note that we're really lucky to have with us tonight another expert that we're aware of. We may have more than one expert here, but Sal Pace, class of 95, has been active in this industry, both on the governmental side as a state representative and I guess you would call it on the consumer side as a consultant, and is now, as Shaun mentioned, the chair of the board of the Marijuana Policy Project, the MPP. And so we're lucky that if we come up with a question that Shaun or Tori can't answer, we can throw it to Sal. And Sal, I just, if you've got anything you'd like to add briefly to this conversation, we'd welcome your voice in here as well.
Oh, I'll be really brief. This conversation covers what I've been doing in my life pretty much nonstop for the last 14 years. So, you know, I'm deeply involved in all of this at various different levels. And Shaun and I were working on a few projects together in a couple different states and pulling together some stakeholders on some projects. So I know Shaun, and I know some folks from Tori's company as well. Jason, the CEO there, is on the normal board, and I've dealt with him a bit. But you know, I just want to, you know, first of all, both these guys are spot on with all their assessments, and you know what they're saying is pretty accurate with you know what most people who are pretty knowledgeable and are plugged in know what's going on, you know, what they'd agree with them. But, you know, I just want to offer to serve as a resource for folks. You know, Tori said something about connecting people and relationships, and that's pretty much what I do in my life, in my professional career. Everything else I do is relationships, and I'm always willing to help out a former or another Williston alum. So if I can be helpful with anybody, whether it's advocacy or political or cannabis industry, you know, I'm talking to a lot of people, and I'm willing to help out and lend my assistance to anybody. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. And while you were talking, Jen Johnson, class of 90, raised her hand just to shout out that she too is a marketing manager for a cannabis dispensary. So we've got more folks from the industry on here. So that's great. So I'm going to jump into a couple of the questions that were pre-submitted and leave it up to the two of you to figure out who wants to take first crack at them. And I don't see all of these people here. I'll check first. Pete Linkram, are you here? Pete. Okay, we're gonna ask the question anyway because people are gonna probably watch the recording. So Pete was asking how you think legalization of recreational use will affect the medical cannabis industry, which has evolved to already provide extensive guidance and oversight from medical providers about how cannabis can best aid patients' health? And do you think that service will start to disappear as legal recreational use increases?
I'm happy to take the first stab at. And I don't think so. I don't think it won't disappear. In most states where they've moved forward with adult use, they've put a lot of barriers around the medical program that exists, giving quick access, making sure that supply does not run out for that. So implementing supply limits on the adult use to make sure that, Massachusetts certainly does that, particularly in the leaner months, in the winter months where there's less supply. Like they make sure that there's enough for the medical patients, and tax incentives, making sure that it's not taxed, and higher potency, availability, and all of that. So I think that's great. There's also another important aspect to adding adult use into the mix, and it's unfortunate, but the stigma around that and of getting a medical card, particularly for veterans, is something that we see a lot. Veterans are afraid to sign up for medical programs, which has, in early stages, but shown to significantly help with PTSD and opiate use disorder, and assist and move away from some of those other things. But they don't want to sign up for the medical card because the VA will say, well, you're smoking cannabis, you no longer qualify for VA benefits. So an illegal adult use pathway allows them to get that recommendation from their doctor and seek those pathways without putting themselves on that record and putting them on a list. They're afraid. And then also gun enthusiasts, right? People who own firearms. In some cases, you're not allowed to apply or get a firearm if you are a registered cannabis user. So there's a big one there. And there's just like your run-of-the-mill person who's just like, I don't want to be on a doctor's list. I just want to, get cannabis for the things that I want it for, and move there. So I actually see, if done in the right way, and we do see this mostly, that the adult use legalization thing is more about destigmatizing more broadly. We'll add to more research, and actually better fill the coffers and enhance medical programs.
Nice. I was going to cover all of those points, so I've got nothing to add. Thanks, Shaun, for the great response.
That's good, because the questions are coming in fast and furious now.
You can have the next harder one.
Okay, we'll see if this one's any harder. Matt Wagman had submitted a question ahead of time. So Matt, if you want to unmute and join us by video or just by voice, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Trying to remember my question.
Oh, I can help you.
Sure.
Ready? Matt wanted to know, is there a possibility that public domestic cannabis companies are given the ability to uplist to a major exchange before federal legalization? He's nodding.
Do you want me to grab this one? I'll start there. One, we are actually in the midst of a SPAC transaction, at which I was under strict guidance from my legal and communications department not to say anything about. So that's all I have to say about that thing. But obviously, we're not a plant touching entity, right? We don't touch plant. We're a software company that services the industry, does compliance software and all this other kind of things. I think that one is just like, you'd have to think about the purpose of why you would want to do it, and just the hard path that you would have. I think it probably could be done, but it would just be so significantly difficult, and going through any kind of public offering transaction is so difficult in itself. For, I don't know, if you just make widgets, it's hard. Why would you add that sort of complexity to your life? It just seems, it seems possible, but very unlikely. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you.
Yep. Matt, did that cover your question fully?
Yeah.
Tori, anything to add? Okay.
I'll add that there's already a lot of companies in the Canadian exchange, and some in Toronto as well. And a number of those have American assets. So
that's definitely important to add, because yeah. And I'm not talk to your broker about stock advice. I don't have anything to say about that, but mixed success. And I think Sal, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the real hope there was like get listed on the Canadian exchange, and maybe America would be imminent, and it just hasn't proved that way. I mean, one company famously hired a former Speaker of the House thinking it would change everything, and it changed very little.
All right, moving on. Niels, you're up next with one, maybe two, maybe three. I don't know. Some questions.
No, denied.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat with my class of '98 classmate, and also with you, Tori. So thanks for the opportunity. Just one quick legal question about the Controlled Substances Act, which, Chappie, building off what you were just saying about all of the other issues outside of banking that you can run into trouble with because marijuana remains, a listed substance under the Controlled Substances Act. Do you see any world where that might change, such that, gun use, access to medical benefits, for veterans, other things outside of what's covered in sort of safe banking might become more accessible for companies that actually touch plants in the future? What do you think?
Sorry, I feel like I've been hogging the mic, but I have a quick, strong feeling about it.
You go
But
first.
go ahead. Well, I just think there's no world in which that like significant federal marijuana reform goes forward that does not address it and significantly delist and deschedule, just completely deschedule. So yeah, Sal, I know MPP has a significant stance on that position and what would move forward, but I can't imagine that the MORE Act would move forward and not address that issue.
Interesting. And kind of my sort of 1B question is, there's so much, both in my current gig working at a crypto company and in my prior gig working at a fintech, there's so much interest in, working in the crypto space, particularly for like funds flows and payment processing. But because of the overlay of the Controlled Substances Act, like even in spite of the Obama DOJ era guidance that kind of loosened up FinCEN enforcement and DOJ enforcement around, legal state marijuana businesses, lots of banks, financial institutions, credit card networks, like don't really want to touch the space. So this is kind of more of an industry question, given, I think, the very positive testimony from Merrick Garland during his AG, discussions with the Senate. Do you see any kind of more traditional banks, financial institutions in the context of going public or an IPO, like underwriters getting more comfortable touching the cannabis business? Because it's, from what I've seen, and I have a limited view on this from my experience, but folks seem very hands-off. Do you see kind of more traditional players getting more involved in the industry moving forward through the current sort of ease of enforcement that both Merrick Garland and some of his predecessors have articulated as being sort of the role of federal enforcement in the space?
Yeah, well, one is like kind of like the reinstatement of the Cole memoranda, right? And whether that would happen. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple parts to your question. The first, I don't think it's, so for instance, no like state legalization would have any political pathway forward without addressing the expungement issue, right? The prior arrest and prior harms and getting rid of that. Well, it actually turns out that like doing that is kind of actually legally difficult in some states, right? It's just, and people who are like, I don't want to like throw that up as an excuse not to, and that's totally fair, but it is actually a little bit difficult because think about this, there's usually a weapons charge, quite often, not usually, but quite often. And there's a weapons charge because it's a legal thing, and people, it's like you have to protect yourself and protect your business. So what do you do about the weapons charge? And that gets thrown in, and that gets a little bit complicated. I know that Michael Thompson, this kind of hung up his case. It was a famous case taken up by the Last Prisoner Project in Michigan. And, there was a weapons charge. Well, if you're moving that kind of product in an unregulated, illicit space, you probably have a weapon. And that's just the fact of the matter. So those things get a little bit more complicated. that doesn't quite get to your thing, but it does start to get at like these things have like so many layers to like start moving them through and enforcement. The final thing I would say is last year when there did seem to be a little bit of movement on safe, I just kind of did a little like poke around. It's like, well, who's lobbying on this issue? And it turned out that like Wells Fargo was lobbying on this issue a little bit, and Bank of America was lobbying on this a little bit. And I don't know, I did a little bit more poking around. I don't know if they were yes or no, right? That didn't come out, right? I don't know if it's like yes or no. I don't know, Sal, you have were they yes?
Yeah, the American bankers, they're yes. They're really pretty vocal on that. I can jump in here. My last call right before this was with Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, and it was just like 2 hours after he released a video with him and Booker and Schumer on Schumer's balcony talking about how they're going to work on cannabis reform. They think they can get some stuff done with reconciliation. And those of you guys who are like politics nerds, it's a process of getting some things through the Senate with 51 votes instead of with 60 votes and getting over the filibuster. But Niels, as far as the question about Controlled Substances Act, I think anything that deschedules marijuana, because right now marijuana is a Schedule 1. It's the same as like I don't know, crack cocaine on the Controlled Substances Act. And so it's the Controlled Substances Act that makes marijuana legal at the federal level. So anything that deschedules it, and it's not going to be the MORE Act. The MORE Act, I don't think is has a chance of getting through the Senate, would by definition take it off the Controlled Substances Act. I do think, safe banking is the Ed Perlmutter bill that would make it legal to bank in the banking in the cannabis industry. And I think most people feel really good about the chance of safe banking and even getting it done before the August recess is what Schumer's saying right now. Now it's, I guess it just got introduced today in the House, and in the Senate, the thing that'll change it now is with Sherrod Brown as the banking chair in the Senate. He's talking about issues of equity. He's talking about labor issues and whether or not he might be trying to amend the bill to ensure labor provisions and equity provisions, and then what that can do as a negotiating point from the cannabis industry on taxation. 280E is an issue. It's a tax code that says if you're trafficking a Schedule 1 narcotic or Schedule 2 narcotic, then you get rid of the cost of doing business. So employee costs are actually taxed as profit in the marijuana industry. And so there might be an opportunity if Brown is trying to insert in some labor provision to negotiate a tax fix. It's really inside baseball, but it means a lot more money for the industry and a lot more opportunity for paying employees better wages and benefits and whatnot. So there's a lot of moving parts, and people are more optimistic, I think, than ever on federal reform. And the last thing I'll mention, we just had our first board meeting today. The brand new U.S. Cannabis Council, which is a combination of MPP, Cannabis Trade Federation, of GAC, Global Alliance of Cannabis and Hemp, of Attach, and of some of the biggest multi-state operators like Canopy and Acreage, Columbia Care, Kronos, and a number of other folks, Hawthorne, they're Scott's Miracle Grow. And now we all have under one umbrella 90% of all the federal lobbyists in DC who are lobbying pro legalization, all under one umbrella. And it's an exciting development and an opportunity to really push the ball forward, we're hoping. And because the industry, at least at the federal level, has been very fragmented. And there's been pushing different directions, and I think it's a perfect timing aligned with the new Senate Majority Leader, who for the first time ever there's a Senate Majority Leader talking about legalizing marijuana.
All right, thank you. So we're gonna, Henry Mitchell's been sitting up there very patiently with his hand raised in the corner of the screen. Henry, we're gonna go to you next. So
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
you're good.
Sure can. Hey, Henry.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chappie and Tori. Wonderful dialogue. I would like to know what your opinions are in terms of what the relationship to the illegal growers. I would assume that there still is a fairly large illegal growth of cannabis that goes into the circulation. Do you have any idea how big that is?
So how big the illegal grower industry is?
Yes.
I mean, there's a million estimations, or they range from, but it's certainly significant. I think California probably has the largest proportion of that. I can go off on a whole tangent about how my intersection of the modern solar industry and the modern cannabis industry kind of came together, and like why those two things like are the best of friends, because they had like this massive significant load they were trying to hide from utilities, and so they all started installing solar. And so like the way you made money as a solar installer was like going to Mendo and selling solar systems. I don't know, I don't have any good estimate, but Canada, for instance, estimates that they're only capturing, of all the cannabis transactions now, and it's federally legal in the entire country, they're only capturing something like 30% of all of the cannabis industry through the regulated market. So it's still significant, even in Canada. It's plus 70% of the market potentially. That may be a little high, but it's definitely at least 50% in Canada. And I would suspect in California it's certainly 70% still. There's just a lot. I mean, there's a huge long history. I'll spin a little yarn here for a second, but there's a long history there. And the idea of taxing this product and plant is really anathema to a lot of people there. And it's just, I think we're going to have to go just be patient and take the time to capture that, and not freak out because we're missing that 70, but be proud that we were able to capture that 30 and build on that from there. That's sort of my hope.
The other question that I had was, in the states where they have legalized it, is it legal for people to grow their own, or have they, because they've made it legal to buy it, they foreclosed opportunities for people to grow their own product? Not for sale, but for their own use.
It really depends on the state. Each framework is different. So Washington and Colorado passed at the same time. Colorado has home grow, Washington does not. They're working on implementing it now, almost a decade later. So it really depends. And to speak quickly on the illicit market, there's still moonshiners out there producing alcohol, even though it's totally legal. So there's still going to be an illicit market. But the point is to get the taxes and the incentive low enough so that it's easy enough for folks to join the legal market, and to hopefully get rid of all these illicit states that are funding that right now. Like Colorado is huge. It's just getting shipped to every single state that we touch because they're all illegal still.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable.
Okay, so we have time for a couple more questions if you want to put them into the chat, and I still have a couple more questions here that were pre-submitted. So I'm going to go to the next one, which goes to a little bit about what you were talking about relationships. And I don't know if JP here is on the call. JP, are you that phone maybe? If you are, you can unmute and ask your question. And if you're not, I'm going to ask it. So we've got a question from JP Crevier, who's 93. And he asks, as an electrical contractor, how does he build relationships with company owners that are developing both grow facilities and retail storefronts? So if you're in the, in a supporting business. How do you make those connections?
Research is definitely the best way to go. Every state, you have to, if you're a legal grow or dispensary, you have to register yourself. And so it's going on, like in Massachusetts, the Cannabis Control Commission's website, and literally just mining for information, hitting them up on LinkedIn, showing up at their stores, because they're never going to return your emails or answer your calls. And so it's just all about networking and research on that one.
Totally agree. And as both Tori and I were saying, like, you come into this business, you're doing everything. But I think one of the best ways to do that research, have a great proposal, and take one thing off their plate, and a complicated thing at that, right? So just know that they're probably overstretched. So the second email is probably the one that they'll answer, not the first. And in fact, maybe not even the second, probably the 15th. But it's just a matter of staying with it, working within the bounds of what they need. I totally agree, though. Great. I'll have to list on these things. So they're usually publicly available, especially in Massachusetts.
Definitely, yeah. And just doing a good job too in building that relationship, because we're going to refer in the cannabis industry. We're pretty lazy folks sometimes. And to make our jobs easier, if we have one good person, we're going to shoot them out to everyone we know.
That's good to know. Especially with the Williston connection here, you may hear from people. Jen, you've got a question if you'd like to unmute and ask.
Yeah, hi, how's it going? I use Weedmaps. We just signed up for Mass for all your pilot stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Well, don't be shy for even a second if they're giving you any trouble. Send to me. I'll crack some skulls.
Everyone's been super great, really knowledgeable. The person on my account has been pretty amazing. So good job.
Good.
I do have a question. So I'm having a hard time finding, for people who ask me and for me as a marketer, a lot of, so we're in multiple states. So Connecticut, medical only. How do we find the doctors that are registered to do medical? There's nowhere to find it. Can't figure out from the board of physicians. And thinking of this and trying as a marketer to find the names of the doctors, how do patients find the physician who will be able to give those medical cards?
Yeah, you know what? I don't have a great answer. I'm going to think about that and just ask a little around internally if I can get back to a better answer. We did have once upon a time a filter of how to find a doctor to get a rec on the platform. I don't know if we still have that though. Frankly, I don't use it that much in New York because there's not much for me to use there. But when I'm in California, I use it all the time. But I haven't been to California in over a year. But that is I think it's an excellent resource, one that I don't have a great answer to right now to point you towards, but I'll just poke around a little bit on the old Slack channel and get back to you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen.
Oh,
sorry, shoot me an email and I'll connect you with somebody.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, I was gonna say probably Google at this point is your best friend. At least if you're in a already legal state, they're not shy about getting out there. Otherwise, I think that it's just going to be this word of mouth is probably the best way to do it.
And I just encourage everybody to take a minute and scroll through the chat. People have been putting in their contact information so that I know I saw Sal put his in. Tori, Shaun, if you want to drop yours in there, people can just quickly scroll through, although they can find you through all kinds of Williston platforms as well. All right, well, I do not have any more pre-submitted questions, although this is the part of the evening where I always, I ask the question that I have a burning desire to know about. Oh, no, there's actually now. Oh no, it's just you guys putting in contact information. Excellent. So revealing how completely shallow I am, I'd be curious to hear what your take is on all of the celebrity cannabis products that are being introduced. Can you talk a little bit about the brand names and the big.
You first, Tori.
Yeah, I mean, you might have noticed a bunch of celebrities enter in the space and you hear a big buzz and then they just disappear. There's been a lot of research done and they don't necessarily have that brand longevity right now that other brands do. And so that's kind of what we're seeing is especially Martha Stewart and her CBD. It was absolutely everywhere, but now that it's launched, I haven't heard of it actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. Like, there's people who are like clear, they're there, and I mean, Snoop seems to want to put his name on everything. He got around and is on everything, but there are people for whom this isn't just kind of like a fly by night. I know that the Belushi that's still with us. He's got a brand out of Chicago that I think is he's stick with it. It's more than him just being like a celebrity. Like I think that's actually his business now. Like that is what he is doing. One of the other things that because the industry is so new-ish in its current form, obviously it's extremely old. Cannabis sativa has been found in Viking tombs, so like I mean it's been around, but in its current form, it's new-ish. You just have this. I feel like every week I have a new thing that is like I have to worry about. This most recent week was Delta 8, and learning everything about Delta 8 and what Delta 8 is even. Apparently can be reduced out of CBD form and hemp as well, and has gotten around some of the federal restrictions on that. So you all don't need to know what Delta 8 is because it will not be around to worry about in 2 weeks, right? Like it, and that's kind of the thing. It's like these CBD things were just popping up everywhere, and now it's kind of calmed down, and that's just sort of where we're in. And the celebrity thing is no different. Everyone seems to want to pop off a brand, and get ready. We're about to hit the holy month, so that's going to be a great month for everyone to throw out their cannabis brand stuff here as we approach April the 20th. So it kind of comes with the territory, and you start to learn to shrug it off, like all the puns that are in the industry too. But you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, if anyone's thinking about doing a cannabis launch in April or 420, don't. We tell all of our clients that is the worst time because nobody's going to listen to you because everybody's talking just then.
I guess I was thinking of, the preview of Seth Rogen's beautifully created pottery items for, enhancing your cannabis experience in your home, which was in the style section of the Times.
Yeah.
So
see, like that would be like almost an exception. Like it's very clear that all that's very genuine, right? He is not a fly-by-nighter. He is not. It's not like ooh, he's not Martha Stewart, right? And as much love and affection I have for Martha Stewart, it's Seth Rogen has been talking about it from the second he hit Hollywood, done movies about it. Like that is part of who Seth Rogen is. And I think, like Tori has said like 1,000 times already on this call, and I really love the point. It's like the genuineness that gets to stick around, people sniff that out pretty quickly. And if you're authentic and genuine, you've got a brand, you got something you can do with it. But if you're just popping in to sell it at Walgreens, people are be like, yeah, screw you later.
All right. Well, any other questions from anyone else? Last call for your burning questions. All right. So I think that we're going to thank Shaun and Tori for their time and their expertise tonight. Thanks to Sal for chiming in.